On this week's episode of the Crowdfunding Nerds, we review the Ask Me Anything thread within the Crowdfunding Nerds community by the head of games of Kickstarter, Asher McClinahan. We discuss the weaknesses of performance-based marketing. We review the top questions asked within this thread, whilst also giving our own thoughts and feedback. Let's get into it. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by Hero Time Manufacturing. That is Hero Time, the numeral one.com. Coach Gleck has been a regular on our podcast. We highly recommend his services. He is a man of integrity. Hero Time, they can make anything. They've got competitive pricing, and they even do game prototypes. So make sure to check out Hero Time, numeral one.com. A link is in the show notes. And if you use the code Crowdfunding Nerds 101, you can get a 3% discount on your production through them. Let's get back into the episode.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Lightning bolt, Facebook ad, Facebook ad.
That's awesome.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host and fearless leader and fantastic human, Andrew Lowen. And this is Sean. He's here too.
You've been eating those energy bars.
Yeah, I actually been using this NeuroGum for energy and focus. It's fancy. Basically, it's gum with caffeine in it. So I don't know. I've had like 30 of them. So, we wanted to talk about the Ask Me Anything that we did with Kickstarter's Head of Games. So in our Crowdfunding Nerds community on Facebook, after our podcast with Kickstarter's Head of Games, Asher McClinahan, he graciously agreed to doing an Ask Me Anything in our Facebook group. And it's got like a crazy amount of comments, which is really fantastic.
Yeah,
people really took advantage of that. And what I found to be super interesting was, if you can ask the, Kickstarter's Head of Games any single thing you want, what would you ask? And just as a creator, there are vendors that are, for example, David Finn of Bridge asking questions. There's Tom Covert, who manages the Board Game Revolution community, asked a question. Ori Kagan, who did, he's like a videographer, and yeah, so lots of people. In addition to creators, there are people that are kind of, I would say, creator adjacent that constantly run into problems that their clients, like us, we are. I mean, even though I am a creator myself, we're also kind of a creator adjacent service in that we do crowdfunding marketing and all of that for a bunch of different clients. And so we hear a lot about their problems and what their challenges are and what they really want and whatnot. But it was really cool to see all these questions, such a variety of questions asked. And I want to say there are 79 comments, which probably means like 40 to 50 questions have been asked. And Asher is responding. I don't know how far he is, if he's responded to all of them or what, but I'd say there are probably, we'll just be conservative and say at least 35 different questions have been asked. And I do not think that we have a repeat question, which is really fun. So what we thought we'd do on this podcast is just get into this and, kind of try to get into the mind of creators and others that had serious questions for Kickstarter's Head of Games.
Yeah, imagine what we will do is we will read the question out, and then we will give our thoughts, and then we can read Asher's response as well and kind of add to it. But there will be a link in the show notes if you want to check out the actual back and forth between people and Asher. Then make sure to check that out. But we will be throwing in our 2 cents here. So Andrew, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? We would probably just go through this chronologically. Yeah,
well, so there's this first question that was asked that's on, so I'm going by newest. So I'm going in like reverse order, if you will. But one that really stood out to me is top 3 actionable tips for a first time creator. That's what they wanted. And then so somebody named Ema said something a bit more niche that usually doesn't get much attention. So what are your top 3 actionable tips for a first time creator that are a little bit more niche, that may not get as much attention?
I think one thing, and I've said this on Reddit and got some traction as well, is that in the pre-launch stage, when you're capturing emails, it's very important that you try to capture emails and also direct people towards Kickstarter or GameFound to hit that, notify me on launch. So what we do when we set up our landing pages is that we capture an email and then automatically direct to the Kickstarter page so that people can hit the notify me on launch. I think that's a really important tip that not many people are doing, and people will probably start copying us now, now that we're vocalizing this. But it's really important because you're sort of optimizing your funnel because you're capturing the email and you're also getting that really important action on Kickstarter. So that's probably one thing I'd say is pretty niche. Not many people know about or are doing apart from us. So that's something I would suggest people set up. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Oh gosh, what are the niche things? I know a lot of stuff seems to be common knowledge, but maybe that's because we're in up to our eyeballs in this stuff. So things which seem pretty obvious to us, people might think is kind of special knowledge. But that's for one thing that comes to my mind, at least.
Yeah, well, I even think that things that are common knowledge are I'll put it in a different way. Things that you know already. People listening to this podcast, there are certain things that we're going to say that you should do already. Where when I tell you this one thing, you're going to say, "Ah, yes, I know that." And those are the things that are the most important things to do. It's really about execution. The things that you should do are things that oftentimes can be left because they might not be urgent. Like if, for example, a phone call. If you get a phone call, you have 4 or 5 rings before that phone call goes to voicemail, and in most cases, that was your opportunity to talk to whoever was calling you. It could be that they were a scammer or a spam call, or maybe calling about something important, or maybe it was mom saying how you're doing or whatever. But you that would be classified as urgent, but the level of importance varies wildly, right? The things I find that can be left behind are the things that are very important but not urgent. Like if you didn't do it tomorrow, if you didn't do it today, it wouldn't ruin you. And I think that one of the things that I would say for actionable tips is, as you're creating your product, as you're creating your project, you're going through the development and everything. It's not ready to launch on crowdfunding. You need to be sharing every single thing that you're doing, and even if it's with a crowd of like 20 people, in your Facebook group or your Discord server or whatever it is, you should be building a community right from day one, that where you have it. When I say day one, I mean the day that you're ready to actually start sharing anything. I believe there's a time that, before anything's ready to be shared, like before you really have a solid prototype that you can actually play and, go from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, I wouldn't share much. But after you have a prototype, even if it doesn't have any art, even if it's just like ugly cardboard and whatever, you can talk about it. And people, as you catalog your progress, there are people that look forward to that, like following along. And it is so valuable to just have 1, 2, 3 of those people stick around. Eventually they could be worth hundreds of dollars, and when you launch your Kickstarter campaign. I had a huge group of those people that, I say huge, I mean, for my first Deliverance campaign, we had like 2,200 people that we earned organically, and then 2,200 or ish via ads. And it was really hard to earn those organic followers, like just really painstakingly difficult. Like 1 person a week was my goal, and it really paid off. We made $60,000 extra because of that group of people. And that was just in the first campaign. I haven't actually done research to figure out how much those people have spent since then, but it is probably why we were able to be so successful, was because of that organic marketing, where I just shared what was happening. So that's we'll just say our number one actionable tip for a first time creator that might not get as much airtime is, there you go. Share what you're doing. Before you think it's ready. And then, okay, so Asher's top 3 were: number 1, when you're creating your projections, add 20% to your costs. He said you will always have forgotten something. And I'm in wholehearted agreement with that. Number 2, ask your playtesters how they would describe your game. Super smart. you'll find common threads, and those threads can become a core part of your pitch on the campaign page.
So
Very cool.
I often do this with like when someone gets a reviewer to do their game, I always watch the review, because sometimes the reviewer will explain the game in a way that I haven't thought about myself, and that becomes a really great marketing line. Another tip I would have, and I've shared this before, is use the back of DVD boxes. So if you have a pirate themed game, look at the back of the box of Pirates of the Caribbean, and there'll be certain terms there that you can sort of steal and use in your marketing messaging. And that's a great place to start, because basically all the back of DVD boxes are all marketing messaging there to sell you on that particular film. So if you've got a game that's very kind of similar in theme, then certainly check out the back of those boxes, is something I would say as well.
That's awesome. And then Asher's final tip was set your goal with the intent to not only get the game made and fulfilled, but make copies to sell after the fact too, which is really important. You want to make this thing to release it into the world. And if you do that, and then the road is over because you didn't produce enough to sell after. I mean, maybe that was your goal, but if you want to actually make a business, you have to have stuff to sell after. You can't just go to Kickstarter again immediately. So that's I think that's a good tip. Hey, crowdfunding nerds, if you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you. All right, now back to the show.
Right, so we have another question here is, if someone launches on GameFound or BackerKit, can they now do their late pledge on Kickstarter? This is a fascinating question, because a lot of people will go to Kickstarter and then they would then take their kind of late pledge stage and go to something like Hive or GameFound or BackerKit. But now Kickstarter has its own late pledge system. So this is a great question, because I think what it highlights is, can you go to GameFound and kind of reach that audience, and then take your late pledge to Kickstarter and then reach the Kickstarter audience and the late pledge. So Asher said, great question, probably a better one for the GameFound or BackerKit, but I believe that those platforms restrict their late pledge and pledge manager to their system if you crowdfund there. I don't know if that's necessary. I don't think that's the case. It might be. But he says this might not be the case. I've only asked anecdotally, not officially. I don't think it's the case. I don't know how they could enforce that. Right? But that's something to consider for people. Now that Kickstarter has a late pledge, it might be possible to go to something like GameFound, reach that audience, then do your late pledge on Kickstarter and hit two birds with one stone. So something to think about.
Yeah. And, first thing I think is like, well, why? Why would you want to, And I mean, if you just reverse the names, like go to Kickstarter and then you run your late, your pledge manager on GameFound, or run your pledge manager on BackerKit, or run your pledge manager on Hive. Those companies all have reach that you would want to take advantage of. And, like Hive, for example,
email list.
Dude, just getting access to Hive's email list has made me a bunch of money. And so, yeah, if I use them as my pledge manager, they'll send an email blast out with my information or with my project, and I make money. You don't have access to BackerKit's email blasts if you don't use them for pledge management. So that's definitely a significant advantage. And I think that Kickstarter, at the moment, it seems more of a tool of convenience. If you're already on Kickstarter, you can just press a couple of buttons. All your products are already loaded into the system, so it'll take less time. And they're going to charge you 5% on the product, but also 5% on the shipping, which is super annoying, in addition to the credit card fees. And so your shipping is going to have to be a little more expensive on Kickstarter, which is always the thing that immediately was like, well, I'm using another company for pledge management. And so I think at the moment it's still a tool of convenience. I don't know that you're going to get airtime in any way by going to Kickstarter. And so I'd say, at the moment, I don't personally see a huge reason to ever use Kickstarter's pledge management except for convenience. I would always use another company's pledge manager for to make more money. But yeah, so that's kind of where my head's at. There was a question that was asked that was like a very accusatory question, and I hear this a lot. I just wanted to kind of address it. So somebody named Nick Sims said, by turning a blind eye to CMON running multiple projects at a time, contrary to your terms of service, he seems like a reporter. How much do you think Kickstarter contributed to CMON's financial difficulties and the risk of those who pledged ending up empty-handed? And there's more. He said, in the future, will you include other crowdfunding sites' outstanding projects in the terms of service so no other company can have 13 unfulfilled projects at once? Would you consider an additional question so that next to the creator's name, it states how many other projects they have outstanding? And Asher responded, but I think that he had to be careful with this one probably. He said, I believe every question deserves an answer from me, but I don't know how satisfactory you'll find this one. Kickstarter does have a term in their terms of service. Questions about, can you run more than one project at once? And the idea is, if you're in good standing, and if you're like generally like in publishing and comics, you may launch and manage up to 6 unfulfilled projects back to back. Design and technology, you can manage up to 2. Generally, like games, you can manage up to 3 in their respective categories. But it says this: creators may only use their overlapping fulfillment privileges in categories where they have a demonstrated track record of fulfillment experience. And it says creators who have already reached the maximum number of unfulfilled projects will have to fulfill previous projects in order to be approved for future launches. Obviously a company like CMON that had crazy success on Kickstarter gets more leeway, where they've successfully fulfilled 15 projects or 20 or 30 projects. They're publicly traded and everything. They're going to get special privileges, if you will. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think Kickstarter is a business and CMON's a business. They've elected to leverage Kickstarter. Well, now they're, of course, using GameFound, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think that there is this mentality of people being upset about about companies that run multiple projects at the same time before fulfilling their most recent. And it's
the danger
yeah.
is you can kind of get into Ponzi scheme, situations
Mhm.
pretty quickly with that. But I think there
We've
is
seen that before too. I mean, Mythic
yes,
Games is a big one.
yes.
They
But I
just
think
collapsed.
there's sort of an overarching point here, which is there going to be greater accountability features for? And it seems like that is coming. It's in the pipeline. I think they've added a system where you can see past projects on their profile page now of a certain creator on Kickstarter, so that's good. So I think we're just going to see more of this, which is I think it's going to help people make informed decisions when they're backing projects. Like, oh wait, this one has 3 projects that they have fulfilled. I'm going to maybe hold back and not back this project until they fulfill some of their other ones or whatever. So it does look like this is on the say a healthy trajectory in terms of helping people make informed decisions of backing projects.
It kind of reminds me of like the UFC before they ran testing for steroids. There were just a lot of guys that were really big and strong, and it's like, wow, this is crazy. That guy is just a genetic freak. No, he's on like steroids. So he's also a genetic freak that is on steroids. And it's so weird how when they implemented more stringent testing requirements, that a bunch of fighters retired. And I feel like this is one of the areas of that Kickstarter really needs to improve. And I think that Asher actually says, as far as creator transparency goes, it's something we're looking into improving for backers. You should be armed with the info that helps you make a backing decision. And I'll say, while I do feel like Nick Sims' question was it kind of gave away that he was angry about how Kickstarter treat their policies, and the fact that it was they contributed to CMON having so many unfulfilled projects and whatnot, even though of course GameFound, CMON's been running campaigns on GameFound. I think that there is a kernel of really, really great I guess a need to change the policy. I do think that something as simple as something that shows how many unfulfilled projects you have would be a really, really great thing to show. It would also discourage those big creators from doing this. But I think that, if Kickstarter just said you can't run, like, no matter who you are, you cannot run more than 3 projects at the same time. Number one, that gives rise to their competition. So if they were very strict on this, then GameFound, of course, if I had 3 unfulfilled projects and I'm a successful company that's in various stages of fulfillment for those projects, and I need to launch a 4th one because, my cash flow, my production schedule, my timelines, everything like that. Maybe, the one project is like on the boat as far as shipping goes. The next one is, being manufactured, and then the one before that is in development and, before manufacturing. Like, I will find a way to use, I will use GameFound is bottom line. Like, if I was a dedicated hardcore Kickstarter creator and they limited me and said, oh, you can't launch anymore, then GameFound's like, hey, we'll take you, and I think that would give rise to the largest creators on Kickstarter using a different platform. And I think GameFound is, of course, in the same boat. If they were to say, I want to say Awaken Realms launched 5 projects in the last year, or Simon launched 3 projects in the last year on GameFound, then, if GameFound was like, oh, we only allow 2, then they would, I mean, Awaken Realms obviously is the team behind GameFound, but Go On Board is another one that launched multiple projects. If they had to fulfill before launching the next one, they would be looking for another way to launch. Indiegogo would get bigger, or there would be some other outlet for these big companies that have large audiences. So, but I do think that more transparency is really what's needed here.
What do you think about them introducing some type of rating system? So let's say once a project has been, delivered and fulfilled, backers,
you mean like
then
for subprime lending, or
no, or it's just like
adjustable rate mortgages or whatever?
No, it's just more like there's a survey afterwards. It's like, how would you rate your experience in terms of communication, in terms of quality of product, in terms of X, Y, Z, and then it's almost like a Board Game Geek score you can put on the creator. That might be something worth.
That actually is. I think that might be a good idea where you can, because they do have currently like a system where you can say, is this project delivered? How happy are you right now?
Yeah, making it public.
So
it's actually like on their profile so people can see, oh, this person has had 4 campaigns and they've got like a 4.98, rating out of 5. So I'm pretty confident.
Well, I do think that, giving creators or giving backers the ability to like lodge a complaint, if you will. Whenever I get a message where somebody's like for example, I had somebody that actually passed away, and there must have been a family member or somebody with their trust sent me an email and was like, hey, we need a refund of this because this person passed away and we're trying to basically cancel the Kickstarter campaigns and get refunds. And our policy is that we can refund 90% of what you have paid, because Kickstarter and Stripe have already taken their fees and stuff. And and I didn't get to that right away. They ended up sending another message and whatever, and then I was able to address that, take care of it, and all. But I think it would be good to have some sort of like, how many complaints have been lodged and solved? Like if this was the, kind of like the Better Business Bureau in the US, or whatever. But I do think that it would be, it generally should be a positive thing. Like if creators are responding to messages, if they are accessible and whatnot, I think that would be a good, proof for trust.
It works for eBay, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at eBay, you kind of like look at, what's their success rate? How many past transactions have they done? It's like, they got like a 98%, positive score. Great. I don't have to worry. I don't have to read anything. I just can, they're trustworthy. So
yeah. I mean, if somebody has, one fulfilled campaign, that is actually a really significant indicator to backers that you can do this again. Yeah. So, and for me, it's like absolutely a limiter for new creators. You are going to have people that are like, well, you've never fulfilled before, so I'm a little worried that this one might not, and I'm just going to wait and instead of backing. And
that's why you need to use the Crowdfunding Nerds, so you can say, well, I've partnered the Crowdfunding Nerds and they're experts in this industry and they've consulted and put me in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, the better an answer you have to someone's concern, the more likely you are to sway them to your side. Like I always say, you can never, there are certain segment of people that you can't say anything right to them that are going to change their mind. There are another segment that you can't say anything wrong that will get them to change their mind, where they're going to back you no matter what. Other people are never going to back you no matter what you say. And then there's the people you're talking to that you need to talk to, that you need to focus your energy on, are the people that are right in the middle, that are like, hey, I'm really weighing out pros and cons, and I'm leaning toward not backing. Here's my concern. And then you have the opportunity to actually address and sway them to your side. The better an argument you can make, the more likely you are to get more backers, right? And every single backer, every single, mid-campaign slump backer makes a huge difference. So just talking to people, being, open with your communications is going to make you more money, bottom line. But
So I have
yeah.
a question here from Brian Henk, who
Okay.
says, you don't need to go into any details of the algorithm, but what's one aspect of the Kickstarter ranking algo that you think more project creators should consider or be aware of? So basically, how do we hack the algorithm is what he's essentially saying, which is an interesting question, because I think a lot of people are thinking about this. So Asher's response was, it's holistic and way more robust than I ever anticipated. Don't over-index in one area because you think it's more important than other areas. Engage your community, create a great page, and treat every action as equal, indexing towards creating value, warm fuzzies for your backers. So I don't think he's going to spill the beans on some type of hack, but I think the general approach is still worth considering. It's the sum of everything that makes your Kickstarter campaign successful and kind of projects it. And I would be under the suspicion, because as I said when we interviewed him, is if I was developing Kickstarter, I certainly would be putting a lot more emphasis on projects that are bringing in fresh blood, so to speak. So I think one of the most important metrics to keep an eye on is new backers, like first-time backers, because in Kickstarter's mind, well, if you get them into the Kickstarter ecosystem, the likelihood of them backing other projects is higher. So you're kind of like expanding the Kickstarter user base, and that's very valuable. That's like acquisition for them. So I imagine that that's probably a key metric in like pushing projects, is the new backer metric. So something to keep an eye on. But I don't think you're going to be able to hack that, or hey, everybody comment, and I just think it's, if as long as you're kind of intentional about, oh yeah, these things all matter. But I think that kind of holistic approach is a good way to approach this.
Yeah, when you think about it, Kickstarter's the object of the game for Kickstarter is to make as much money as possible, reach as many people as possible, and sustain their company into the future. And when you think about what are the actual kind of metrics that do that, using, for example, new backers, like we do this all the time for Google, because half our business is running or working for small businesses and ranking their websites higher on Google for important key phrases, most often service-based businesses, local service-based businesses, plumbers, and financial advisory firms, and accountants, and solar companies, you name it. We market them. And Google doesn't let you know what they do, and they change their algorithm on the regular, to try to improve it, or show more of what they want, right? And so you can't ever quite hack the algorithm. But the way I look at it is this: you consider a well diversified portfolio when you're considering investing. If you had, let's say, I don't know, $100 million, would you put it all in the stock market, like all $100 million in the stock market? And you should never do that. Would you put it all on, bet it all on red at a roulette table? Of course not. You would never do that, right? That's so risky. You could lose all of it. And so um, you need to be careful about how you invest and diversify. So you put some into cryptocurrency, but not all of it. You should put some into real estate, but not all of it, right? You should put some into gold, or other like physical assets. You should put some into the stock market, and be well diversified, so that when something crashes, for example, what Bitcoin will probably do like next week, and then maybe the stock market goes higher, and then the week after that Bitcoin comes back, right? And the stock market goes lower, and real estate does whatever it does, and all of these things. all of the bars are going up and down for these various categories. But overall, if you are well diversified, your total, your $100 million, which, if anyone wants to give me $100 million so I can do this, then please do. But your total income will go up. Or during hard times, your total tally is going to go down at a slower rate. So it's important to be well diversified. Now, apply that to the way that algorithms work. If I could talk about Google, but let's focus on Kickstarter. So you have what we talked about, like your new backers, right? If you have, I would say, like, the average campaign is going to earn between 5 and 10% of the backers are going to be new, meaning that they, like, I want to say Galactic Cruise was a really big campaign that generated maybe 5% of their backers. It could be a little more, but I think it was less than 10 for their first campaign were new to Kickstarter. And that number, I think, is important. But if you go more like toward botany, that campaign had, I could be crazy, but I think it was like 40 or 50% new backers that had never gone to Kickstarter before. Or there was that one video game that we did, Gate Zero. There were about 50% of their backers had never backed a project on Kickstarter before. And they told us that Kickstarter was reaching out to them, asking what it is that they're doing and whatnot. They were very, very intentional on discovering how so many new backers were coming. And what I think new backers show is that you have a project that has never kind of been this, that has never been on Kickstarter before, like a new offering.
Treading new ground.
Yeah. And that's an indicator. But I think that the indicator is probably something like you have 5 to 10% new backers. That's okay. But anything higher than that amount is an outlier. And outliers are the things that get noticed. And I think that you can probably, if you have 5% new backers, it's probably not going to help you or hurt you. But if you have 0%, it's going to hurt you. And then if you have 15% or more, it's actually going to add to that algorithm. That it's gonna add positive points to your ranking, if you will. Then you look at total funding, like the total dollar amount you fund. That the more that you fund, the more that money that you make, the higher Kickstarter fee will, they're higher their earnings from your project. So that to me is an obvious one, that Kickstarter is going to want you to make as much money as possible, because that means their cut of what it is that you make is 5%. It goes higher. So they're going to rank projects that make money. Projects that generate a raw quantity of backers are important. I think also, to a certain extent, maybe a lesser extent, but when you think about it, like if you just consider it like this, everyone starts at net 0. Your score is 0, and that means that you are an average project on Kickstarter. If your backer count is high, that's going to add positive points to your total score. The highest score is the one that ranks first, right? So Project We Love is an excellent, like, that's an obvious score increase. Maybe that adds 10 points to your base score, just the Projects We Love badge. But then the number of comments, like how active people are, I think is a really important thing. And that's something you can control as a creator. So you need to encourage your people to comment. If you are posting updates and you're, have a really cool Kickstarter page. I've seen lots of pages like that don't really get much engagement, because everyone's like, oh yeah, I see it, I like it, I'm backing, I'm all in, and that's all. But if you are actively engaging your people on social media and saying, here's our latest Kickstarter update, I would love to know your feedback here. If you're asking people questions inside your Kickstarter update, if you're answering people that comment and respond to you in a timely manner, all of that I think will add to your positive score. So number of comments are a big deal. The actual raw traffic to your campaign, I think, is also relevant. Where you have, it's probably not as big a, it won't add as many points, if you will, to, as new backers or whatever. But if you just send traffic to your Kickstarter page via Facebook and they browse and whatnot, I think that that's probably another ranking factor as well.
Well, talking about Project We Love, there was a question by Kyle Flowers who says, how do you typically decide on the project we love Whenever I research this, the process seems a bit odd and unclear. I've seen a few of recommendations to email members of the Kickstarter games team prior to launching for a better shot. And then Asher links a Google form that they have. So we'll include a link in the show notes. So if you are interested in getting that project we love, that form will just have a series of questions that will go to the games team on Kickstarter that will help them sort of process your application for that. And it's just really just detailing what your project is, what makes it unique. And I really think it just comes down to their personal preference. Like, oh, this looks cool. It's probably individual people on their team. He did say that they choose projects or process projects on Thursdays. So, kind of getting it in maybe early in the week or, early on Thursday might be a good kind of way to move forward. But we'll include a link in the show notes if you are interested in applying for that. And it might be worth just checking it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I thought it was interesting. I learned, so Asher is an actual gamer, which is really great. So he's an RPG player, but I find it interesting. He said that he doesn't really play that the games that he likes are very heavy. He said Galactic Cruise and Heat are at the top of his list at this moment, but he doesn't usually get to play games that are heavy because he doesn't have like a core game group. In fact, I actually think he's moving. But I thought it was interesting to see. Tony Vicinda asked, "What was your first favorite game?" Which Asher said the card game Casino. And then, what hits your table most in the last year? What are you dying to get a chance to play but haven't yet? This question, it might be very quick to pass along. It's not that important. The content doesn't seem to be that important on the surface. But I actually think this is a very, very important and telling question that I am very happy about the answer, because this guy is, while being a guy that I enjoy, a nice guy, I'd love to hang out with him at some point. This guy understands games, and he named some really, really great things. So his favorite TTRPG is Vaesen. He explains why it's simple to play, thematically interesting, easy to pick up and play for new RPG folks. Board game is probably Everdell because it's mechanically simple and the finish is great for people who don't know what board games are capable of being. And then one he's dying to play, he mentioned, like I said, Galactic Cruise and Heat. Both fun games, actually. But I thought that was really, really great because it shows that this guy is one of us, if that makes sense.
He's in the cult of cardboard.
Yeah, he's one of us. So, and I mean, I know he was moving in the last week. I think he's moving to the West Coast somewhere. But he said that I wonder how many games he has to move. Might be a lot. So, yeah. So I thought that was a really encouraging answer to that question.
So one from Thomas Covert of the Board Game Revolution community, he says, when is Kickstarter going to fix its referral tracking system? Right now, any pre-campaign traffic that gets captured doesn't properly credit the original source. As far as I can tell, Kickstarter ends up taking credit. I think this happens because most people follow a project and then return through the email notification when it goes live, but that traffic isn't accurately attributed. And so Asher says, it's on our list. I can't give you any specific details on timeline, but I can say that this is something that we very much care about and have put time and thought into already. So it sounds like they are aware of those issues. And this is precisely why we do not recommend that anyone use performance-based marketing, because these referral metrics are not accurate. They can give you an approximation, but at the end of the day, you're going to have some marketing agency kind of pulling numbers from the air saying, yeah, we think we got you these numbers, and hey, now pay us this, sum. So it's not a system that we're particularly fond of. In fact, we've been burnt by it from our publishing arm with agencies that have used that setup. And we wouldn't recommend it. I think, Andrew, you put up a really good point in our Facebook group recently when someone asked about performance-based marketing, is that the tendency with performance-based marketing is that if you've done all this pre-marketing stuff and then they launch Facebook ads, it's possible that the people actually were kind of captured through your efforts, which didn't involve the marketing agency. And now they're taking a commission on the leads and the kind of backers that you brought about yourself without their help. They just kind of came at the end and took the credit. And then now they've and that's going to happen a lot when you first launch, right? You're going to get a lot of backers coming in, and it's going to be very difficult to know where they're exactly coming from. If you have an agency that has a financial incentive to take credit for backers coming in, well then you possibly are overspending in terms of commissions for that system. So I don't think it's a great system. The value is that a lot of these companies who do this offer to pay your ad spend, so that can be helpful to kind of offset your costs. But I think
they'll pay up front and then you have to pay back every penny.
Yes. So. Yeah. So I think as a business owner, kind of being aware of realistic ad spend amounts, which I would say you'd want to spend anything between 5 and 15% of your total amount raised. So if you have a fund goal, just budget for about 5 to 15% of your total amment raised. That's your ad spend for the entire campaign, and just be aware of that. And just you'll have to save, and and don't forget there's also a late pledge. So if you do run out of money for ads, at the end of the day, you're going to get a big fat check from Kickstarter or GameFound, and you'll have the resources then to continue your advertising in the late pledge and acquire backers at a far more reasonable cost per backer. So there's those things to keep in mind.
Yeah, what you were talking about earlier with the, like a marketing company coming in, and if it's performance based, they're going to send ads out, track who is purchasing based on their referral links or what they estimate to be a backer, and you're going to end up getting your organic audience and your paid audience that you worked on before the campaign cannibalized by this other company. And that means that you generated the interest and the excitement for your project, and then another company comes in, and because the person that was excited, they see an ad for your game on Facebook, if that's the first thing they see, and they click it, and they back. If it was a performance marketing thing, you have they would have seen, if they would have seen your email 5 minutes later, or later that day, or even the next week, they would have backed then. But because the performance marketing agency sent an ad to them first, they are going to charge you a 15% commission on that or whatever. So it's called cannibalization. It happens in other ways. Like if you are number one on Google for whatever keyword, you shouldn't be also paying on Google ads for that keyword, and that's going to cannibalize. That's going to cost you money per click when you could just have earned those clicks without paying money, because you were rank 1 on Google. So why pay to put an ad on top? There are cases in which you would want to do that, and I've worked with many clients, big, like there's one particular product, like an as seen on TV product, where we were marketing against Walmart and Costco and Amazon and all the like Target and all the big retailers that carried their product, and we wanted to be ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on Google. We wanted to be ranked 1 in ads. We wanted to be the featured snippet on the page and everything. Like we just wanted to dominate that whole page, because when somebody searched for the product name, we wanted to make the money from selling it, and rather than letting one of the distributors make the money. And so there's a place for that type of strategy, but it's not in your crowdfunding campaign, I can tell you. So I think that's really important. Another concept that's really important, I've shared this on the podcast before, is drivers and catchers. Oh, by the way, for those that are considering using performance marketing services, my recommendation, if you're going to do it, is to start those services on day 3 of your crowdfunding campaign, or maybe like later into day 2. The reason that I feel that way is because your day 1 is going to be the biggest day you've got. You're day 1 and 2, right? And the important thing is that you capture all of the results of your marketing effort on that first day. And I would even suggest, you shouldn't not market. You should run ads and everything, but don't have a marketing agency do that. That is performance based. We are not performance based. So I don't care if you make $1 million or $100,000, whatever. We're not going to be charging you based on how much money you're making from us. We're going to be simply charging based on the amount of time, effort, and energy that we are putting into the marketing, and so our fees are generally flat. And I think that this is, I could go on for a long time about that, but I want to talk about drivers and catchers. The idea behind like the marketing. the referral tracking system on Kickstarter is what you call a last click system. That means the very last click that someone makes is the one that gets 100% of the credit for bringing that person to your campaign. So when somebody sees your emails for the last 6 months and they're a huge fan and they contribute in your social media like crazy and whatever, and then you launch on Kickstarter and they know when you're launching, they have marked it in their calendar, and they search your project's name in Kickstarter's system on Kickstarter's website, find your project and back you, then Kickstarter credits 100% of that effort to to that search, even though that everybody would agree, Asher would agree as well, that is not the credit, that Kickstarter wasn't the one that earned you that person, that back, right? And or that pledge. So the idea behind the driver and the catcher is really important for you to understand. Drivers drive interest. Catchers basically take that interest and kind of capture that pledge. So when your driver would be like a Facebook ad where somebody had no idea what your game was before, and now all of a sudden after this Facebook ad they do. They go to the landing page. The landing page captures the email, and so that would be what I would call a catcher. The landing page catches, and then but the Facebook ad was the thing that drove interest. Reviewers are the same way. They drive interest. They talk to their audience and drive interest. So just consider what is driving interest. And you don't even have to look at your numbers. You don't have to look at what referral tag is causing the most backers or whatever. Think before that from the perspective of what is driving interest in my project, and what marketing initiatives, what organic, people talking about it, what initiatives are the things that are causing people to know about my project, and then what other things are causing that interest to be captured, where I get something, if it's an email or if it's a pledge from a new backer or whatever it is. What are those things that will really help you understand what's happening and why, from a conceptual standpoint? So the referral tracking system, I think Kickstarter is going to a weighted tracking, where if somebody searches and backs your project, but then they click your email and visit and whatever, it'll give, if it was $100 pledge, it might give $10 to search and $60 to your email, and whatever, $30 to something else. So it's trying to, that type of system is rather than 100% going to the last click they made, it's trying to average out all the ways that one person is interacting and engaging with you. So which I think that's a good change.
Great. So there's a question here from this guy called Andrew Lowen, who says, what frustrations did you have as a creator that were solved when Everett Taylor took over Kickstarter, and what creator-specific frustrations are you actively working to understand and remedy now that you're on the other side working for Kickstarter? So yeah, sounds very familiar, that name. So I wonder what Asher said. So he says, Everett is awesome and genuinely cares about creators. I think that shows through the work he's been doing to bring meaningful features to the platform, but I think he's really just getting started in the past year or so. And you really do see this and sense this, don't you, that there's just been a sort of influx of changes, and there's been a complete 180 in terms of what the company was doing 5 years ago even. So it's great to see. So he continues, it takes a while to get in, really deeply understand needs, and get what was planned out of the way before the good work can really happen. My focus right now is availability and action. And Asher shared with us, he said, he's been to different conventions and things, and the one thing he had kept on hearing back from publishers was that Kickstarter was unapproachable. In fact, I had a publisher this week tell me that one reason why he chose GameFound is because he had a theme that was historically based, and he was worried that, because it has this historical, basis, that it might offend some people. And then if people saw, crying wolf, would he have any recourse if his project was suddenly shut down? And he felt like on Kickstarter he didn't, and it was too risky. So he felt on GameFound, because they have better customer service at the time, that he went with GameFound. So I'm glad that they're actually remedying this with better accountability. And even right now, if you email games@kickstarter.com, Asher's promised to process that and actually see it and get back to you. So something to keep in mind. Anyway,
Yeah.
Asher, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to continue what Asher said in this comment.
Yeah. Go ahead and finish that, and then I'll jump in.
So he continues, if you are a creator, you should be able to reach the games team at Kickstarter quickly. If you have a problem that needs solving, we'll be there to help you with it as quickly as we can. There's a lot that our product team is working on, and I'm very excited about some things coming down the pipe. But my goal is to make sure that game creators are heard and seen when we make decisions about features we build into the platform next. So it looks like they've got their ear to the ground and that they're listening to people and they are moving swiftly. So this is all kind of stuff we've all been wanting to see as publishers and marketers in the space. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, and there was Paul Bedford. What I wanted to add was that there was a question that he asked that I'll just read out. It says, one of GameFound's major draws is that they assign each creator an account manager, whereas Kickstarter is infamous for its poor communication. Is this being addressed? And the two questions are super related. So he said he thinks it's important for his team to be accessible. That said, having an assigned account manager is challenging when we are a team as small as we are, about 4 full-time folks. At the time I'm posting, we have 776 games projects live. We would each, myself included, be responsible for managing a little under 200 live projects at a time. That's a challenge, but one we're trying to take on as effectively as we can. So he said, it ends with, I'm very hopeful that through action, we can prove that we're available and listening for your needs. Try hitting us up at games@kickstarter.com to test us out. So I think that GameFound definitely has an advantage over Kickstarter in this area, because if you're smaller, you're leaner, you're able to address specific clients. If I send an email, or if I reach out to a GameFound staff member, they're going to get back to me. They're much more likely to get back to me, rather. My account manager, I'm able to probably meet with them on over Zoom or whatever, right? But the games team at Kickstarter, by the very nature of the amount of projects they have to manage, cannot be as accessible as that. So what I would say, Kickstarter's strategy is probably to deal with anybody that reaches out to them, rather than people that use the platform. They're going to be reaching out in as more of like a support role to help people that have an issue that they can't solve on their own. That's going to limit the number of projects that they have to manage, if you will, by many orders of magnitude. So instead of having to manage 776 creators, they only have to address maybe the 30 or 40 that are reaching out. And I think that is a much better option given their kind of constraints. But I have seen myself that they are pretty approachable. They do respond, and many of our larger clients that have reached out, they get personal meetings with Asher to talk about strategy and planning and other things like that. So I have seen a lot of improvement there. Before, it used to be like very just like there was nobody that would reach back. And so while I think that GameFound will probably, based on the way that GameFound is able to change and morph and adjust much quicker, Kickstarter is a cruise ship compared to GameFound, which is more of like a speedboat. They're just able to turn on a dime, and whereas Kickstarter, it's like the Titanic saw an iceberg a mile away and couldn't turn in time, right? And so I think that the concept is just that GameFound will always be ahead of Kickstarter in this area. So if you're looking for that more personalized service, I think that GameFound has the edge, but Kickstarter's doing its best to catch up and deal with what it has. But honestly, I think that the bottom line for me is you as a creator are responsible for your own success. At the end of the day, others can help you. We help our clients all the time. We answer lots of questions not related to specifically our marketing services. And you really need people like that you don't need to rely on the Kickstarter staff to be that person for you. I would say that if that is, where you're relying, you're in trouble. But it is a real pro that GameFound can do that. And so, if they have a dedicated account manager, you can ask questions. The only problem is, how much of an expert is that account manager in crowdfunding and in, the things that you need in order to be successful. Maybe more of an expert on GameFound as a particular platform than on overall crowdfunding success. But I can say Alex Radcliffe, if it's Alex, is like, he's a complete badass. Knows all sorts of things about all sorts of things. So,
well, there's other questions that people have asked. If you want to see the extensive list, then make sure to go to the Crowdfunding Nerds community. There's an Ask Me Anything thread. We'll include a link in the show notes for you. And yeah, the Crowdfunding Nerds community is a great place just to connect with other publishers, other marketers. Just it's kind of a hotbed of different people in the industry, from big publishers and to smaller first-time ones. So it's a great mix, and it's a great place to kind of just get suggestions from people about different suppliers and things. So check it out, and I hope you found this podcast episode helpful.
Awesome. All right, Robot Richard, send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy.